It all started 6 months ago, though I didn't realize it at the time. My wife, Lauren, had been distant, but I thought it was just the stress of raising 2 kids and managing her career. We had been married for 8 years, and while things weren't perfect, I believed we were solid. I had no reason to think otherwise. Then came the visits. My cousin Brandon, 20 years old and fresh out of college, had started coming over frequently. He was charming in that cocky, youthful way, with a smile that made everyone adore him. The kids loved him, Lauren seemed amused by his antics, and I didn't think twice about having him around. After all, he was family. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. Lauren had always been fiery and unpredictable, qualities I'd fallen for but had learned to tread carefully around. Lately, though, she'd been more irritable, snapping at small things, blaming me for her bad moods. I chalked it up to exhaustion and tried to be understanding. One evening, I came home late from work. Brandon was there, as usual, sprawled out on the couch with Lauren, both laughing at something on the TV. It wasn't unusual, but something about the way they sat, too close, too comfortable, nagged at me. I brushed it off. They were just bonding. Family, right? But the doubts began to creep in, especially when Brandon started showing up unannounced, sometimes when I wasn't home. Lauren brushed it off as nothing, accusing me of being paranoid when I brought it up. "He's your cousin, for God's sake! Don't be ridiculous!" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut. I let it go, ashamed for even questioning her. Then came the night I couldn't ignore. I had tucked the kids into bed and was about to turn in myself when I heard something through the walls. At first, I thought it was just the usual late-night chatter from Lauren and Brandon. But as I listened, my stomach dropped. It wasn't talking, it was moaning. For a second, I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It couldn't be. No, I told myself, it had to be something else. Maybe they were watching a movie with the volume turned up too high. But the sounds were unmistakable, and they weren't coming from the living room. They were coming from upstairs. From our bedroom. I stormed down the hallway, ready to confront whatever was happening. But as I reached the door, everything went quiet. The only sound was my ragged breathing and the blood rushing in my ears. I stood there, my hand on the doorknob, but I couldn't bring myself to turn it. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and opening that door would send me plummeting into a darkness I wasn't ready to face. After what felt like an eternity, I walked away. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the doubt and anger swirling in my mind. But I convinced myself I was imagining things. It was late. I was tired. Lauren loved me, didn't she? And Brandon, he was my cousin. He wouldn't do that to me. Would he? The cracks had started, and I was about to learn just how deep they ran. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. Maybe the sounds I'd heard that night weren't what I thought. Maybe the laughter, the touches, and the way Lauren lit up when Brandon walked in were innocent. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Lauren had always been volatile, but lately, her mood swings had become a daily storm. One moment she was affectionate, the next, a screaming hurricane over the smallest inconvenience. She was never like this before, or maybe she was, and I just ignored it. It all came to a head one Sunday afternoon. Brandon had come over again, and the kids were playing in the backyard. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when I overheard Lauren and Brandon talking in the living room. Their voices were hushed, conspiratorial. I crept closer, pretending to rearrange some books on the counter. "What if he finds out?" Lauren whispered. Her voice was tinged with panic. "He won't," Brandon replied, his tone calm and reassuring. "Just play it cool." I felt the blood drain from my face. I wanted to barge in and demand answers, but I didn't. Instead, I grabbed a beer from the fridge, walked into the room, and plastered on a fake smile. "What's going on in here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Lauren's eyes flicked to me, wide and startled. "Nothing. Just talking about the kids." She forced a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Brandon, on the other hand, seemed completely unbothered. He leaned back on the couch, giving me that casual grin of his. Yeah, man, just talking about Noah's soccer game, Brandon added, as if he hadn't just been discussing some dark secret with my wife. I nodded, pretending to buy their act, but my stomach churned. Something was definitely going on. That night, after Brandon left, Lauren was unusually quiet. She didn't pick a fight or complain about anything, which was strange enough. I tried to initiate a conversation, but she brushed me off, saying she was tired and heading to bed early. I watched her retreat upstairs, my gut screaming at me that something wasn't right. I stayed downstairs, staring at the TV without really watching it. My mind was elsewhere, spinning with questions. What was she hiding? Why did Brandon suddenly feel like more than just my cousin? I replayed their conversation in my head over and over, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Eventually, I made a decision. I needed answers. I couldn't keep living like this, with suspicion gnawing at me every second. The next morning, I confronted Lauren. I waited until the kids were off to school and we were alone in the kitchen. She was scrolling through her phone, sipping coffee, looking like she didn't have a care in the world. We need to talk, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. She glanced up, her eyes narrowing. About what? About Brandon. About what's going on between you two. Her expression shifted in an instant, from confusion to rage. What the hell are you talking about? She snapped, slamming her mug down on the counter. You think I'm screwing your cousin? Are you out of your goddamn mind? I hadn't expected her to admit it outright, but the way she reacted, too defensive, too angry, only confirmed my suspicions. I don't know, Lauren. You tell me. The way you two act around each other, the things I've overheard, it doesn't add up. She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. Oh, so now you're spying on me? What's next? You gonna install cameras in the house? Jesus, you're pathetic. Her words stung, but I didn't back down. I'm not blind, Lauren. Something's going on, and I'm not just going to ignore it. She laughed bitterly. You're paranoid. Brandon is family. You're seriously accusing me of what? Flirting? God, grow up. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but I knew I wouldn't get it from her. Not yet. So I let it go, for now. But in that moment, I realized something. Lauren wasn't going to come clean. If I wanted the truth, I'd have to find it myself. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. After Lauren went to bed, I opened her laptop. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do, but my desperation outweighed my guilt. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A message thread with Brandon, buried in her email under a folder labeled Work. The messages weren't overtly explicit, but they didn't need to be. The tone, the emojis, the way she signed off with, "Can't wait to see you again." It was enough. I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding. There it was. The proof I needed. But instead of feeling relief, I felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal. The woman I'd built a life with, the mother of my children, was lying to my face. And Brandon. My own flesh and blood. I wanted to punch a hole in the wall. But instead, I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and went to bed. I had the truth now. But I wasn't ready to confront it, not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to see it with my own eyes. And when I did, there would be no coming back. After that discovery, everything felt different. Every smile Lauren gave me, every kiss on the cheek, every casual conversation felt fake, like it was part of some elaborate performance. But I wasn't ready to act on what I'd found. Not yet. I needed undeniable proof, something that couldn't be dismissed as paranoia or a misunderstanding. So I waited. I watched. And I planned. One Friday evening, Brandon came over again, this time under the pretense of helping out with the kids. Lauren played along like it was perfectly normal, chatting with him while I grilled burgers in the backyard. Noah and Emma ran around, giggling and carefree, blissfully unaware of the tension simmering beneath the surface. "Want me to take over?" Brandon asked, nodding at the grill with that easy, confident grin of his. I shook my head, barely able to look at him. "I've got it." He shrugged and walked back inside, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I stared at the flames licking the edges of the burgers, imagining them consuming every lie, every betrayal. I wanted to confront him then and there, but I knew Lauren would just turn it into another screaming match, deflecting blame and calling me crazy. Instead, I focused on the kids, laughing with them and pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was seething. Watching Brandon and Lauren exchange glances across the table during dinner only fueled the fire. It wasn't obvious, at least, not to anyone who wasn't looking for it. But I saw it. The lingering looks, the subtle smiles, the way she laughed a little too hard at his jokes. They thought they were clever. They thought I didn't notice. But I did. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, I heard them talking in the living room. I stayed in the kitchen, just out of sight, straining to catch their words. "What's your plan?" Brandon asked, his voice low. Lauren sighed. "I don't know yet. He's been suspicious lately. Maybe you should tell him," Brandon suggested, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. "Might be fun." Lauren let out a bitter laugh. "You think I want to deal with that? He'd never let me live it down. Besides, it's not like we're hurting anyone." My fists clenched so tightly my nails bit into my palms. Not hurting anyone? Did she really believe that? Did he? I wanted to burst into the room, to force them to face the damage they were doing. But I didn't. Not yet. The next day, I decided to act. I set up a small camera in our bedroom, hidden discreetly behind a decorative vase on the dresser. It wasn't something I ever imagined I'd do, but I needed proof, real proof. Something I could use to confront her without giving her a single opportunity to lie. I hated myself for stooping to this level, but I hated the lies even more. That evening, I told Lauren I had to work late. She didn't seem the least bit concerned, barely looking up from her phone as I kissed her goodbye. I drove to a nearby coffee shop and parked in the lot, waiting. My heart pounded as I checked the camera feed on my phone, the app displaying a live view of our bedroom. At first, there was nothing. Just the empty room, the bed neatly made, the blinds drawn. I started to second-guess myself. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe she wasn't as brazen as I thought. But then, the door opened. Lauren walked in, followed closely by Brandon. My stomach dropped as I watched them, my worst fears unfolding right in front of me. She closed the door behind them and turned to him, a smile spreading across her face, a smile I hadn't seen in years. They kissed. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. It wasn't just the act itself, it was the way she kissed him, with a passion I hadn't felt from her in years. They moved to the bed, laughing softly, completely oblivious to the camera capturing every moment. I couldn't watch anymore. I closed the app and stared out the windshield, my hands shaking. The anger was overwhelming, blinding, but underneath it all was a crushing sense of heartbreak. The woman I had loved, the mother of my children, was betraying me in the most personal, intimate way possible. When I finally returned home, the house was quiet. Brandon was gone, and Lauren was in bed, pretending to be asleep. I stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at her, wondering how someone could betray their family so easily. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the footage in my mind. Tomorrow, I would confront her. Tomorrow, I would end this charade once and for all. But even then, I had no idea how much worse things would get. The next morning, I woke up early. Lauren was still asleep, sprawled out on the bed like she didn't have a care in the world. I watched her for a moment, anger and heartbreak swirling inside me. How could she act so normal, so innocent, after everything she'd done? I got dressed and headed downstairs. The kids were already up, watching cartoons in the living room. I made them breakfast, trying to keep my hands steady as I flipped pancakes. Every smile they gave me felt like a knife twisting in my chest. They had no idea their family was on the verge of falling apart. Once Lauren finally came downstairs, hair slightly tousled and wearing the same robe she'd wrapped herself in after Brandon left the night before, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but sharp. She froze for a moment, her eyes narrowing. "About what?" "About Brandon. About last night. About the lies." Her expression flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. I saw the panic, the realization that I knew. But then she recovered, her face twisting into a scowl. "Are you serious? This again? You're obsessed. There's nothing going on with Brandon, and I'm sick of you accusing me." I laughed bitterly. "Don't bother lying, Lauren. I saw it. I saw everything." Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. I pulled out my phone and opened the app, letting the video play. Her eyes widened as she watched herself, clear as day, in our bed with Brandon. "How could you?" I demanded, my voice trembling with anger. "How could you do this to me? To our family? To them?" I gestured toward the living room, where the kids were laughing, completely oblivious to the chaos brewing in the kitchen. Lauren's shock quickly turned to anger. "You put a camera in our bedroom?" she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "What kind of creep does that? Do you even hear yourself? You're disgusting." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I'm disgusting? You're the one screwing my cousin in the bed we share, and I'm the problem? You're damn right you're the problem," she snapped. "You've been distant, cold, so wrapped up in your own world that you didn't even notice I was miserable. This is on you, not me." I stared at her, dumbfounded. She wasn't even sorry. She wasn't trying to deny it anymore, but she wasn't apologizing either. Instead, she was blaming me. "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice shaking. "I gave you everything, Lauren. I worked my ass off to provide for this family, and this is how you repay me?" She rolled her eyes, her tone icy. "Oh, spare me the martyr act. You're not perfect, you know. You're boring, predictable, and honestly, half the time, I feel like I'm raising a third child instead of having a partner." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I refused to let her see how much they hurt. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "If that's how you feel, then we're done. I'm filing for divorce." For the first time, her confidence wavered. "You don't mean that," she said, her voice softer now. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work things out. For the kids. Don't you dare bring the kids into this," I snapped. "You didn't care about them when you were sneaking around with Brandon, so don't act like you care now." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand, stopping her. "I'm done, Lauren. I'll pack my things, and we can figure out custody later. But this marriage is over." I packed a bag that afternoon and left the house. I didn't have a plan, but I couldn't stay there, not after what I'd seen, not after what she'd said. I checked into a cheap motel and spent the night staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I thought that was the worst of it. I thought I'd hit rock bottom. But the next bombshell was just around the corner. 2 days later, I was at the lawyer's office, going over the divorce paperwork. Lauren had already tried calling me a dozen times, leaving voicemails that swung wildly between anger, guilt, and desperation. I ignored them all. The lawyer mentioned something about the kids, about custody arrangements, and something inside me clicked. I realized I needed to know one more thing before I could move forward. A DNA test. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but after everything I'd learned about Lauren, I couldn't ignore the possibility. If she'd been lying to me for months, or years, who's to say the lies didn't go deeper? I went to the clinic that afternoon, submitting my samples and filling out the paperwork in a daze. The waiting was torture, but when the results came back, they shattered what little I had left. Neither Noah nor Emma were mine. I read the report over and over, hoping I'd misunderstood, but the words didn't change. My children, the children I'd raised, loved, and sacrificed for, weren't biologically mine. But they weren't Brandon's either. I had no idea whose they were. And Lauren? She had lied to me about that too. I sat in my car, clutching the report, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The betrayal, the lies, the years of my life wasted on a woman who didn't deserve it, it was too much. But as the initial shock faded, a strange sense of clarity settled over me. I couldn't change the past, and I couldn't control what Lauren had done. But I could control what happened next. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. And I wasn't going to let her keep me from the kids. Even if they weren't mine by blood, they were mine in every way that mattered. Lauren had taken everything from me, but she wasn't going to win. Not this time. The DNA test results burned a hole in my pocket as I drove back to the motel. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The betrayal was now absolute, layered deeper than I ever thought possible. Not only had Lauren cheated with my cousin, but she had lied for years about the very foundation of our life together, our children. But as the anger simmered, it didn't drown out the ache in my chest. Noah and Emma weren't just names on a report, they were my kids. I'd been there for their first steps, their first words, every scraped knee and bedtime story. The idea of them being someone else's didn't make me love them any less. If anything, it strengthened my resolve. Lauren's lies had fractured my world, but I wasn't going to let her shatter the one thing that mattered most, my relationship with the kids. That night, I decided it was time to confront Lauren once and for all. I wasn't just going to ask for answers, I was going to demand them. She owed me that much. I called her, and to my surprise, she picked up on the first ring. "Finally," she said, her voice strained. "I've been trying to reach you. We need to talk," I said bluntly. "Face to face." There was a long pause. "Fine. Come home." Home. The word stung, but I swallowed my pride and agreed. When I walked through the door, the house felt different. The warmth it once held was gone, replaced by a suffocating tension. Lauren was sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked up as I entered, her expression wary. "What do you want to say?" she asked, her voice brittle. I didn't waste time. I pulled the DNA test results from my jacket and tossed them onto the table. She stared at the papers, her face going pale as the realization hit her. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my voice cold. Her hands trembled as she picked up the report. I don't know what to say. How about the truth for once?" I shot back. "Who's their father, Lauren? Who have I been raising all these years?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "I don't know," she finally whispered. "You don't know?" I repeated, incredulous. "How is that even possible?" She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "It was before we got married. I was seeing someone else, briefly. But when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't know if it was his or yours. I thought—" She stopped herself, choking on her words. "You thought what?" I pressed. "I thought it didn't matter," she said, her voice breaking. "You loved me. You loved them. I thought we could be happy, and it wouldn't make a difference." I stared at her, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. "It makes a difference, Lauren. It makes all the difference in the world." She reached out, but I pulled back, shaking my head. "Don't," I warned. "You've done enough." The kids came running into the kitchen then, oblivious to the tension. "Daddy!" Emma shouted, throwing her arms around me. Noah wasn't far behind, grinning up at me like I was his hero. My heart broke all over again. I knelt down, hugging them tightly, fighting back tears. They didn't know the truth, and I wasn't about to be the one to tell them. They were innocent in all of this, and I wasn't going to let Lauren's lies take me away from them. "I love you both so much," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We love you too, Daddy," Emma chirped, her small arms squeezing me tighter. After they went to bed, Lauren tried to talk to me again. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small. "I'm filing for full custody," I said without hesitation. Her eyes widened. "You can't do that. They're my kids." "They're mine too," I said sharply. "Maybe not by blood, but I'm the one who's been there for them every step of the way. And I'll fight like hell to make sure they don't end up with a lying, selfish person like you." She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, but I didn't stay to comfort her. I walked out of the kitchen, each step feeling like a door closing between us. Whatever love I'd once had for Lauren was gone, replaced by a determination to protect the kids at all costs. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings with lawyers and gathering evidence. I filed for divorce and petitioned for sole custody, using the DNA results and Lauren's infidelity as leverage. She tried to fight back, painting herself as a devoted mother who made one mistake, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. Brandon tried to reach out, too, leaving me voicemails apologizing and begging for forgiveness. I deleted every one without listening. He was dead to me. By the time the court hearings rolled around, I was exhausted but resolute. I stood before the judge, laying out every detail of Lauren's betrayal and why I believed the kids would be better off with me. Lauren cried through most of the proceedings, but her tears didn't move me. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. I was awarded primary custody, with Lauren allowed supervised visitation. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. When I told the kids, I kept it simple. "Mommy and I aren't going to live together anymore," I said gently. "But no matter what, we both love you very much." Noah and Emma were confused, of course, but they accepted it with the resilience only children seem to have. As for Lauren, she tried to rebuild her life, but the damage was done. Word of the affair spread through our social circles, and Brandon wasn't welcome at family gatherings anymore. He'd burned his bridges, just like Lauren had. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. I had what mattered, my kids and a fresh start. Lauren had taken so much from me, but she couldn't take that. She couldn't take my strength, my resolve, or my love for Noah and Emma. And as I stood in my new home, watching the kids play in the backyard, I realized that while Lauren's lies had broken me, they hadn't destroyed me. I'd survived. And I was ready to rebuild. The divorce had been finalized for 3 months, and life was starting to feel normal again, or as normal as it could after everything that had happened. I was still adjusting to being a single father, juggling work, the kids' school schedules, and everything else on my own. But despite the chaos, I felt lighter, freer. The constant tension, the feeling of walking on eggshells around Lauren, was gone. Noah and Emma adapted faster than I thought they would. Kids are resilient, and while they missed their mother, they seemed happier in the calm, stable environment I worked hard to create. Lauren's supervised visitations were awkward at first, but I made sure to keep things civil for the kids' sake. I wasn't about to let them see the bitterness I still felt toward her. One evening, as I was tucking Emma into bed, she asked me something that stopped me cold. "Daddy, why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore?" I hesitated, trying to find the right words. "Sometimes grown-ups don't get along, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean we don't both love you and Noah very much." She frowned, her little brow furrowing in confusion. "Did Mommy do something bad?" The question hit like a punch to the gut. "It's complicated," I said softly. "But you don't need to worry about that. Just remember, we both love you, okay?" She nodded, satisfied for now, and snuggled into her blankets. But her question lingered in my mind long after she fell asleep. I hated Lauren for putting me in this position, for forcing me to shield the kids from a truth they weren't ready to understand. One afternoon, about a month after that conversation, I got a call from my cousin Rachel, Brandon's older sister. I hadn't spoken to her since the fallout, and seeing her name on my phone made my stomach turn. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," I said cautiously. "Hey," Rachel replied, her voice hesitant. "Look, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to call." "What's going on?" I asked, bracing myself. "It's about Brandon," she said, her voice tight. He's been a mess ever since everything came out. He's been saying some things. Things I think you should know." I frowned. "What kind of things?" She hesitated, then sighed. "He's been talking about Lauren. About how things started between them. He told me she came onto him first, that she was the one who pushed for whatever they had." Anger flared in my chest. "So what? He's blaming her now? Trying to make himself look like the victim?" "I'm not defending him," Rachel said quickly. "He's an idiot, and I've told him that. But there's more. He also mentioned something about the kids." My stomach sank. "What about the kids?" Rachel hesitated again, then blurted it out. "He said Lauren admitted to him that she didn't know who their father was. That she thought it might be some guy she was seeing before you got married." I closed my eyes, the rage bubbling up again. "I already know. The DNA test confirmed it. They're not mine." Rachel was silent for a moment. "I'm so sorry, Ryan. I had no idea." "Yeah, well," I said bitterly. "Neither did I. For 8 years. I just thought you should know," Rachel said softly. "Brandon's been spiraling and… I don't know. I thought maybe it would help to hear it from me." "Thanks," I said flatly, then hung up before she could respond. That night, I sat alone in the living room, replaying Rachel's words in my mind. The anger I thought I'd buried came roaring back, along with a fresh wave of bitterness. Lauren had destroyed so much, not just for me but for the kids, too. And Brandon, my own flesh and blood, had helped her do it. But as I stared out the window into the darkness, I realized something. Their lies no longer had power over me. I was free of them, free to build a life that wasn't tainted by deceit and betrayal. Noah and Emma were my kids in every way that mattered, and I wasn't going to let anything, or anyone, change that. A week later, I had another run-in with Lauren. She was dropping off the kids after one of her visitations, and I could tell something was bothering her. She lingered in the doorway, wringing her hands and avoiding eye contact. "Is something wrong?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. I wanted to say I'm sorry." I stared at her, stunned. "Sorry for what, exactly?" "For everything," she said quietly. "For lying to you, for what I did with Brandon. For not being honest about the kids. I know I've hurt you, Ryan. And I know I can't fix it. But I am sorry." Her words caught me off guard. For the first time, she seemed genuinely remorseful, not defensive or manipulative. But it didn't change anything. "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully. "But it doesn't undo what you've done." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know. I had to say it." I watched her leave, her shoulders slumped, and for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of pity. But it was quickly overshadowed by the resolve that had kept me going through all of this. Her regret didn't matter. What mattered was the future I was building for myself and the kids, a future free of lies, free of betrayal, and free of Lauren's toxic influence. I closed the door, locking the past behind me, and turned back to the life I was reclaiming. The days turned into weeks, and the chaos of the divorce began to settle. My focus shifted entirely to Noah and Emma, making sure they felt loved, stable, and safe. I knew they were still processing the changes, even if they didn't fully understand what had happened. Every bedtime story, every soccer practice, and every silly pancake breakfast felt like a small victory in rebuilding what Lauren had destroyed. But as life moved forward, the shadows of her betrayal lingered in unexpected ways. One evening, I was sorting through old photo albums. The kids were asleep, and the house was quiet except for the hum of the dishwasher. I hadn't opened these albums in years, but something compelled me to look. There were pictures of Lauren and me on our wedding day, beaming at the camera like nothing could ever come between us. Pictures of Noah as a newborn, cradled in my arms while Lauren smiled at his tiny face. I stared at those images, feeling an ache deep in my chest. The life I thought I had, the love I thought was real, was all a lie. But then I turned the page and found a photo of Emma on her first birthday, frosting smeared across her chubby cheeks. Her smile was so pure, so full of joy, that it brought tears to my eyes. The love I felt for the kids was real. It had always been real. No DNA test could take that away. The next day, I got a call from my lawyer. "Ryan," he said, his tone serious, "there's something you need to know." "What is it?" I asked, already dreading his answer. "Lauren's lawyer reached out. She's planning to challenge the custody arrangement." I gripped the phone tighter. "On what grounds?" "She's claiming that since the children aren't biologically yours, you shouldn't have full custody. She's trying to use the DNA results against you." The rage I thought I'd buried came roaring back. "She's seriously doing this? After everything?" "I'm afraid so," he said. "But don't worry, we have a strong case. You've been their father in every way that matters. The court will see that." I hung up, my mind racing. Lauren's audacity was staggering. First, she betrayed me, then she lied about the kids, and now she was trying to use her own lies to take them away from me. I wouldn't let her. The custody battle was ugly, dragging on for weeks. Lauren's lawyer tried to paint me as an unfit father, pointing to the DNA test as evidence that I had no legal claim to the kids. But my lawyer was relentless, presenting evidence of my role in their lives: school drop-offs, doctor's appointments, birthday parties. He even brought in teachers and neighbors as witnesses to vouch for my dedication as a parent. Lauren, on the other hand, didn't do herself any favors. Her infidelity came up in court, as did Brandon's involvement. Her credibility was in shreds by the time it was over. The judge's decision came on a rainy afternoon. I sat in the courtroom, my heart pounding as the judge delivered the verdict: primary custody awarded to me, with Lauren allowed limited visitation. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. I had won. The kids were safe. That evening, I took Noah and Emma out for ice cream to celebrate, though they didn't understand why. As they laughed and smeared chocolate on their faces, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Despite everything, I still had them. When we got home, Emma tugged on my sleeve. "Daddy, are you happy?" she asked, her big eyes full of curiosity. I knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I am," I said honestly. "Because I have you and Noah. You two are my everything." She hugged me tightly, her little arms around my neck, and in that moment, I knew I'd made it through the storm. Lauren didn't take the court's decision well. She called me that night, furious and sobbing, accusing me of turning the kids against her. I didn't argue. I didn't engage. I just hung up. Her words didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the life I was building for Noah and Emma, a life filled with love, stability, and truth. A few weeks later, Brandon tried to contact me again. He sent me a long-winded email, full of apologies and excuses, claiming he was misled by Lauren and that he wanted to make amends. I deleted it without reading past the first sentence. Brandon had made his choices, and I had made mine. Family or not, he was out of my life for good. The months that followed were a slow but steady climb toward healing. I threw myself into work and spent every free moment with the kids. We started new traditions: Friday night movie marathons, Saturday morning hikes, and homemade pizza dinners where the kitchen turned into a flower-covered war zone. It wasn't always easy. There were nights when the loneliness crept in, when the weight of everything I'd lost felt unbearable. But then I'd hear Emma's laughter or see Noah's determination as he mastered a new skill, and the pain would fade. I wasn't the man I'd been before Lauren's betrayal. But maybe that was a good thing. I was stronger now, more focused on what truly mattered. The lies had broken me, but they hadn't destroyed me. And I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. For me. For the kids. For the future I was determined to build. Life after the custody battle took on a quiet rhythm. I finally felt like I could breathe again. The house wasn't just a place to sleep anymore, it was a home, filled with the laughter and chaos that came with raising 2 kids. Noah had started soccer, and Emma insisted on dance lessons, so my weekends were a whirlwind of games, recitals, and snack-packed car rides. It was exhausting but fulfilling in a way I hadn't felt in years. But no matter how much progress I made, reminders of the past still crept in. One evening, I was cleaning out the attic, sorting through boxes of things Lauren and I had accumulated over the years. Most of it was junk, old receipts, knickknacks we didn't need, but then I found something that stopped me cold, a stack of letters. They were tucked into an unmarked envelope, buried in a box labeled keepsakes. My hands trembled as I opened the first one, the handwriting unmistakably hers. The letters weren't addressed to me. As I read, my stomach turned. They were love letters to someone named Eric, dated just months before Noah was born. The details were explicit enough to leave no doubt about their relationship, and the timing aligned far too closely with Noah's conception. This was it. The missing piece. Eric was their father. That night, I stayed up, debating whether I should confront Lauren with the letters. She had already admitted to lying, and I wasn't sure if dragging up more of her past would accomplish anything. But the thought of Eric, the man whose DNA my kids carried, kept me awake. Who was he? Did he know about Noah and Emma? Did he care? The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't doing this for Lauren. I wasn't even doing it for me. I was doing it for the kids. Tracking Eric down wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. A quick search led me to his social media profile. He lived 2 states away, was married, and had a young daughter. His life looked picture perfect, the kind of curated existence people flaunt online. But I knew better than anyone how deceiving appearances could be. I stared at his profile picture for a long time, debating whether to reach out. Part of me wanted to leave it alone, to let sleeping dogs lie. But another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that Eric deserved to know, and more importantly, so did the kids. A week later, I sent him a message. It was short and direct, explaining the situation without too much detail. I included the DNA test results and offered to talk if he wanted to know more. It took 3 days for him to reply. His response was polite but hesitant, asking for more information and expressing shock at the possibility. We exchanged a few messages before he finally agreed to meet in person. The meeting was tense. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our towns, and when Eric walked in, I knew it was him. He had Noah's dark eyes and Emma's easy smile, and seeing those features on a stranger sent a pang through my chest. We sat across from each other, both awkward and unsure of how to begin. "This is a lot to process," Eric said finally, his hands gripping his coffee cup. "Are you sure about all this?" I slid the DNA test results across the table. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." He read them, his face growing paler with each line. When he finally looked up, there was something like guilt in his eyes. "I didn't know. Lauren never said anything. Do you have any idea why?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. He shook his head. We ended things when she got engaged to you. I never heard from her again. I didn't even know she was pregnant." His words hit me like a hammer. Lauren had known all along. She had chosen to keep this secret, not just from me, but from Eric as well. Eric surprised me by wanting to meet the kids. At first, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. They were my children in every way that mattered, and the idea of sharing them with a man I just met felt unbearable. But after thinking it through, I realized this wasn't about me. It was about Noah and Emma. They deserved to know the truth, even if it complicated things. The meeting was carefully planned. I didn't tell Noah and Emma everything, only that Eric was a family friend who wanted to meet them. They were shy at first, but Eric was warm and kind, and it didn't take long for them to warm up to him. Watching them interact was surreal, like seeing parts of them I hadn't fully understood before. When the visit was over, Eric pulled me aside. "I don't want to disrupt their lives," he said earnestly. "You've done an incredible job raising them, and I'm not here to take that away. But if it's okay with you, I'd like to be a part of their lives." It was the last thing I expected him to say. For so long, I'd feared the idea of someone else stepping in and taking my place. But Eric wasn't trying to replace me. He was trying to fill in the gaps Lauren had left behind. Over time, we worked out an arrangement. Eric visited occasionally, slowly building a relationship with Noah and Emma while respecting the boundaries I set. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but I could see how much it meant to the kids. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of closure. The lies that had once defined my life no longer had power over me. The truth, as painful as it was, had set me free. Lauren didn't take the news well when she found out about Eric's involvement. She accused me of undermining her, of dragging the past back into the present. But I didn't care what she thought anymore. She had made her choices, and I was finally making mine. The future wasn't what I'd envisioned when I stood at the altar with Lauren all those years ago. But as I watched Noah and Emma laughing with Eric during one of his visits, I realized it didn't have to be. This future, the one built on truth, forgiveness, and love, was more than enough. As Eric's presence in Noah and Emma's lives grew, I couldn't ignore how much they seemed to blossom. Noah, always reserved, started opening up more. Emma, ever the curious one, peppered Eric with endless questions about his hobbies, his childhood, and his favorite foods. It was bittersweet to watch. I was still their dad, the one who had been there through it all, but seeing them connect with Eric reminded me of the holes Lauren's lies had left in our lives. Despite the awkwardness, I found myself surprisingly at peace with the arrangement. Eric never overstepped his boundaries, always deferring to me when it came to decisions about the kids. He knew he was walking into a world I had built, and he respected that. It didn't take long for me to see that he genuinely cared for Noah and Emma. In a way, his presence validated the sacrifices I'd made. It wasn't just me fighting to give them a good life anymore. Lauren, however, was unraveling. Her anger about Eric's involvement turned into desperation. She started calling me at all hours, leaving messages alternating between tearful apologies and venomous accusations. "You always have to be the hero, don't you?" she spat during one particularly heated call. "This isn't about the kids. It's about you wanting to control everything." "Control?" I shot back. "The only person trying to control anything here is you. You kept the truth from all of us. This mess is yours, Lauren, not mine." Her bitterness only grew when she realized how much Noah and Emma were enjoying their time with Eric. She saw his presence as a threat to her already tenuous relationship with them. I didn't stop her from seeing the kids, but I made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate her using them as pawns in her games. She tried, of course. At one of her supervised visitations, she told Noah, "Daddy doesn't understand how much I love you." He told me about it later, his little face scrunched in confusion. I reassured him the best I could, but her manipulation made my blood boil. I wasn't the only one she lashed out at. Brandon called me one evening, drunk and rambling. "She's losing it, man," he slurred. "Keeps blaming me for everything. Says it's my fault her life's a mess." "It is your fault, Brandon," I said coldly. "You made your choices." "I know," he mumbled, defeated. "I know." It was the first time I'd heard him sound remorseful, but I didn't care. He and Lauren had burned their bridges with me, and no amount of regret was going to change that. One day, Lauren called to ask for a meeting. She sounded calmer than usual, almost subdued. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small cafe near the courthouse, the same place we'd once celebrated winning custody of Noah as a baby. The irony wasn't lost on me. She looked tired, her once sharp confidence dulled by months of consequences. "I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice quiet. I didn't respond, letting her continue. "I've made so many mistakes. she admitted. I lied to you, to Eric, to the kids. I ruined everything. I know I can't fix it, but I want to try. I sipped my coffee, keeping my expression neutral. What does trying look like, Lauren? I don't know, she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I want to be better. For them. For myself. I believed she was sincere, but sincerity didn't erase years of betrayal. That's up to you, I said finally. But don't expect anything from me. My priority is the kids, not you. She nodded, her hands shaking slightly as she gripped her coffee cup. I understand. In the months that followed, Lauren made small steps toward rebuilding her life. She found a new job, started therapy, and seemed to take her time with the kids more seriously. While I still didn't trust her completely, I could see she was trying. The kids noticed it too, and though they were cautious around her, they seemed to appreciate the effort. Eric, meanwhile, became a steady presence. He visited regularly, and even helped coach Noah's soccer team. Watching him and Noah on the field together was strange at first, but I couldn't deny how happy it made my son. One night, after a game, Eric pulled me aside. I just want you to know how much I respect what you've done, he said. Raising them the way you have, being there when they needed you, it's incredible. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I did what any father would do. No, he said firmly. You did more. Life wasn't perfect, but it was better. The chaos of Lauren's lies no longer defined my days. Instead, I focused on the moments that mattered, watching Noah score his first goal, helping Emma with her science project, and laughing with them over burnt toast and spilled juice. Lauren's lies had nearly destroyed me, but I had built something stronger in their wake. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And as I tucked the kids into bed one night, listening to their soft breaths as they drifted to sleep, I realized I was exactly where I needed to be, free, loved, and finally at peace. A year had passed since the custody battle, and life had settled into something that felt like normal. The kids were happy, thriving in school and activities. Eric remained a steady presence in their lives, and even Lauren seemed to be making strides in her own personal growth. While my feelings toward her remained distant, we'd found a way to coexist peacefully for the kids' sake. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was one I was proud of. Then came the final twist. It was a quiet Saturday morning. I was making pancakes with Emma when my phone buzzed on the counter. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. Hello? Is this Ryan? A woman's voice asked. Her tone was hesitant but firm. Yes. Who's this? My name is Angela, she said. I'm Eric's wife. The name hit me like a brick. What's this about? There was a pause, and then she said, I think we need to talk. It's about Eric. I stepped into the living room, away from the kids, my heart pounding. What about him? She took a deep breath. He's been keeping something from you. From all of us. I only just found out myself, but Eric isn't Noah and Emma's biological father. The room spun. What are you talking about? The timeline, the DNA. I know, she interrupted. I thought the same thing, but Eric did a private paternity test recently. He had doubts, and it turns out, he's not their father. Neither are you. Her words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. I sank onto the couch, trying to process what she was saying. Then who is? That's what we're trying to figure out, Angela said. Eric confronted Lauren about it, but she won't say anything. I thought you deserved to know. I ended the call in a daze, the weight of her revelation pressing down on me. How could this be possible? I thought I'd already uncovered all of Lauren's lies, but this was something else entirely. That afternoon, I confronted Lauren. I didn't give her a heads up, I just showed up at her door. She answered, her face pale when she saw me. We need to talk, I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. What now? Eric isn't their father, I said bluntly. Neither am I. Who is it, Lauren? Who's the biological father? Her face went white. I don't know. Don't lie to me, I snapped, my voice rising. You've been lying for years, but this is a new low, even for you. She sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. I'm not lying, she whispered. I really don't know. It could have been anyone. The disgust I felt in that moment was immeasurable. Anyone? Do you even hear yourself? These are your children, Lauren. They're our children, she said fiercely, looking up at me. You raised them. That matters more than biology, doesn't it? Her words were like a slap in the face. Yes, I had raised them, and I loved them more than anything. But that didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't erase the years of lies. You're unbelievable, I said, shaking my head. Do you even care about the damage you've caused? Tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't tell if they were from guilt, regret, or something else entirely. I never wanted this, she said. I never wanted to hurt you or the kids. But you did, I said coldly. And now we're all left to clean up your mess. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced with questions. Who was the biological father? Should I keep searching for answers? Or should I let it go and focus on the life I'd built with Noah and Emma? In the end, I realized the truth didn't matter, not the biological truth, anyway. Noah and Emma were mine. They always had been. I didn't need a DNA test to prove that. The next morning, I sat down with the kids. There's something I want you both to know, I said gently. Noah looked up from his cereal, curious. What is it, Dad? I love you, I said, my voice steady. No matter what. No matter what anyone says or what happens, you'll always be my kids. Okay? Emma frowned, tilting her head. Why wouldn't we be? I smiled, pulling them both into a hug. You will. Always. Over the next few months, I let go of the questions and focused on the present. Eric remained in the kids' lives, but we kept things simple. Lauren continued her slow journey toward redemption, though my trust in her was irreparably broken. As for me, I found a peace I hadn't known in years. The past had scarred me, but it hadn't destroyed me. I had survived the lies, the betrayals, and the heartbreak. And in their place, I'd built something stronger, a life rooted in truth, love, and resilience. One evening, as I watched Noah and Emma play in the backyard, I realized something. The truth wasn't about blood or biology. The truth was in the laughter of my children, in the bond we shared, and in the life we'd created together. And that truth would never change. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit like and leave a comment with your favorite part. We'd love to hear your perspective.